Welcome everybody to another mini lecture. Today we'll be continuing our discussion on reasoning, thinking clearly as it pertains to language. As per the title of this video, we're going to be discussing Aristotle's 10 categories, or the 10 classes of being, 10 predicables or Praedicamenta, which in essence are a classification system to describe all essences, to describe all phenomenon that exist. I promise by the end of this video, you'll have a general understanding of the 10 categories of being, how it pertains to language. Don't forget we're doing a book giveaway, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, at 1,000 subscribers, so make sure you subscribe down below. So the 10 categories of being is an ontological framework in which they're trying to describe the highest level of genera or genus, right? So the top categories of being, of existence. The most broad sense of classification, so that everything that exists fits into one of these categories. And so what Aristotle was getting at was creating this framework in which we can understand the way in which entities can be described and predicated. And so what we're looking at with the 10 categories of beings are the different ways to analyze and describe these aspects of reality, whether it be the physical characteristics, the states, the relationships, the activities of these essences. And so, of course, this is fundamental to Aristotle's metaphysics and, his epistemology in general. It applies very well to the fundamentals of language as well, learning about language and the categorization of words. To understand what something is fundamentally important, of course, to be able to analyze that substance in relation to reality as well. And so this is giving structure to these philosophical inquiries, as well as the states of being and understanding. And so relating the words to reality is fundamentally what we're trying to do with language. And in today's day and age, with all of these nuanced terms nowadays, especially in modern science, we need to ensure that we're really talking about what is real. And so that gets into a deeper epistemology of knowing what is real and do the words represent the reality. And so as a fundamental basis, what we're going to be looking at today is the 10 categories, because every phenomenon of existence fits into one of these categories. So everything exists either in itself or in another. If something exists in itself, it's a substance. If it exists in another, it's considered an accident. And so these are the two great classes that are present within the 10 categories. Substantives, which represent substances, and attributives, which represent accidents. And so, of course, the first category is substances. And so this refers to individual entities which exist in themselves. They exist independently. Substances are the primary object of predication, and they include things like humans, cats, houses, any sort of physical phenomenon. And of course, Aristotle saw this as the primary category of being. And this is very simple. This is individual things, objects, things that exist, substances that exist. If we think back to our last video on the subject, we're looking at individuals and their essences here. A substance could be my coffee table, as well as all coffee tables. All right, and that does it for the substantives of the 10 categories. And as I mentioned earlier, the other 9 categories of being represent different states, relationships, attributes, etc. of certain substances and are known as the accidents. The first of the attributives would be quantity. This refers to any sort of measurable aspect of a substance. And this, of course, includes things like size, weight, length, height, number, anything that is measurable, right? Anything that is quantifiable. This deals with how much of something that there is. Next here we have quality. This, of course, represents the attributes and characteristics of a substance. This includes things like color, shape, texture, temperature, as well as states. So it being gas, liquid, or solid. Next here we have relation, and this describes, of course, the relationship between substance and itself or other entities. So examples of this could include larger than, smaller than, closer than, farther than, similar to, part of, etc. Next here we have place, and this refers to the location or position that a substance is in space. And this includes concepts of being in a particular city or province or forest, etc. You're looking at the geographical region that the substance is in. Next, we have time. Of course, this refers to the temporal aspect of the substance or event. This includes when something occurred, for how long it occurred, as well as the relationship that it has to the past, present, or future. Next, we have the position, and this refers to the orientation or posture of a substance in space. Not to be confused with the place. Here we're not concerned with where something is. We're concerned with how it's oriented or arranged in space. So this could include things like standing, lying down, sitting, leaning, things of this nature. Next, we have the state, and this refers to the condition or mode of a substance. This includes things like a human being sick, happy, healthy, asleep, sad, awake, etc., as well as something being turned on or off, as well as something being in motion. Next here we have the action, and this is the activity or the process that a substance is engaged in. This includes things like walking, talking, eating, building, etc. It really refers to anything, and really this refers to any sort of activity or operation that a substance is engaged in. Lastly here we have passion, and this refers to the different types of experiences or changes that a substance undergoes. Now this can include experiences such as feeling pain, pleasure, emotions, sensations, as well as any sort of physical transformation that a substance is undergoing. So within this, it would include things like development or regression or things like that. Okay, here are the 10 categories in their entirety. We have the one substantive, that is substances, as well as the other 9 attributives, the 9 accidents. You could see how the substances exist within themselves, but the rest cannot exist independently. They all rely on a substance to have some sort of meaning and relationship to reality. And so for Aristotle, to be or being in itself refers to anything that exists or anything whatever. So Aristotle was largely concerned with what was, right? It was more empirically minded than, say, something like Plato's work. He was really concerned with the underlying structures and understanding the reality, the nature of being. Interestingly, he did believe that there must be some sort of unchanging being that is the source of all other being. And so Aristotle's work was more empirically minded than, of course, Plato's. It was really grounded in observation and logic more so than it was abstract theory, right? We could see that he's hyper-focused on what is, what it meant to be. And not that he necessarily negated this idea of non-empirical knowledge. He still gave credit where credit was due, especially in his metaphysics. But largely he's concerned with observation, right? And so how this relates to our discussion now of science and the way the world is at this point, largely my concern is the relationship that our scientific terminology has with reality. There's a much different relationship between observing something empirically with our senses, such as my cat messing with all my papers here, or my computer, or my phone recording, or the trees outside, than there is to be looking at something through an electron microscope that's been adulterated with 9 steps of sample preparation. There's something different than looking at something empirically as it exists in nature, rather than looking at something in a laboratory that is isolated as much as it possibly can to control the confounding variables. And so especially when it comes to things like models that are, computer generated that seem to trick our senses, right? Everyone thinks that we can observe an atom, but in reality, it's impossible to observe an atom. It's impossible to empirically observe genetic material, right? So we have all of these systems and technologies that allow us to understand this phenomenon to a certain extent. It still kind of begs the questions of their existence in reality in a functioning body. I really don't think that we've escaped the question of whether or not a body functions as it does when it's alive the same as when it's dead. And that goes back to why they didn't want to dissect people back in the Hippocratic era. They didn't think that a dead body represented a body that was vital and alive. Largely within science, we're looking at these cell lines that have been alive outside of a body for a long time, something like a HeLa cell. It really begs the question of whether those cells represent that of the real body, and the existence of a cell in general is almost questionable, right? Because when we visualize it under electron microscopy, there is an adulteration of the substance. And so we're not looking at these things completely empirically either, right? We are intervening before drawing any sort of inductive reasoning from this. So it's really important that we look back at the basics here and understand what a substance truly is, and what does it take for something to become a substance, right? If it's grounded in observation, which I agree is a great way to go about it, not necessarily that a rationalism approach isn't appropriate, but when we're concerned with the description of substances and entities and essences and their relationship to reality, there needs to be substantial amounts of evidence to provide the claim that's being made. And so with substances, we need to ensure that the word aligns with a reality. And do the technologies that allow us to see beyond the realms of our senses and observations, does it really pertain to that of nature, to that of what is real, right? Or are these just laboratory artifacts? Perhaps they're real in a laboratory sense, but they may not be real in a person, a human, an animal, a living organism in consciousness, right? There seems to be a large assumption with the study of science in general here. It's like the atom is a great example. Look at the data that gives us the model of the atom. It's a much different phenomenon than the model of the atom itself. And so all of us picture this atom as some sort of materialistic unit of life, of matter. But in reality, we have no true concept of what an atom could look like, right? All we have are these models, but any sort of physicist would tell you that the model does not necessarily depict what is real, right? Because the models are 99.999% empty space, nothing, right? But that's certainly something. The reason my hand can't go through it, there's something more and larger than these materialistic models that we have. So that can be very confusing, especially when it comes to the classification of substances. So that's how it pertains to our discussion of science. As it pertains to the discussion of logic, of course, we need to ensure that the reality matches the language, because the language is used in reasoning. And if the reasoning is true, logically, then the reality should be true as well, so long as the reality and the language align and we are representing everything properly. So I really hope you found this lecture informative, helpful, insightful in any sort of way. If you did, give us a like, share, comment, follow. If you want to enter the book giveaway, give us a subscribe. If your followers aren't private, that's fine. If they are private, send me a message on Instagram telling me that you subscribed so you can enter the book giveaway. It's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. We're going to be giving that away at 1,000 subscribers. Make sure you like and share this with a friend. We're really looking at the foundations of language and logic here. So I really hope you found this helpful. We're going to keep building on this more and more. We may roll back at a certain point in the future and go over these more in depth. I really wanted to give you guys a general understanding because some of the lessons that we're going to be learning in the following weeks are going to rely on the ideas of these substances, these attributives, the accidents, right? How these phenomena relate to substances. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Take care.